Okay, I think we can get started. So yes, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar for the ASHE linked to PAYE and self-assessment data for England, Scotland, and Wales. This is the dataset briefing for the Research Fellowships 2025. So before we delve into the data set itself, if we can just move on, Karen, I'll just give you a very quick rundown of really what the Research Fellowship funding opportunity is about. So primarily, there are a few things here. So what we really want to do is we really want to unlock policy impact by enabling research that addresses real-world challenges using our ADR England flagship data sets. And we want to ensure trusted, high-quality evidence through data, which is underpinned by the flagship dataset framework. We want to empower new users, particularly with the right guidance and resources so that you can confidently work with these flagship datasets. And this funding opportunity is open to all researchers who are eligible for accreditation. So successful applicants, if you're not already, will need to become accredited researchers under the Digital Economy Act before you're able to access the data. And this is also building on the proven success of previous ADR research fellowships and hopefully amplifying their outcomes and creating lasting benefits for policy and society. So really it's about inspiring the use of ADR England flagship data sets and driving research that benefits society. So if we can go on, Karen. So this is one of a series of data set webinars that we're delivering over the course of the pre-announcement phase of the funding opportunity. The purpose of them really is to help you understand the scope of RF 2025 and discover some of the research opportunities that each data set can offer. We hope that these data set webinars will also give you some practical insights so that you can actually shape strong and feasible research agendas. And it'll also give you the opportunity to engage with the data experts and partners who can answer your questions about the data set. So that's a very brief rundown, and there are resources such as the full opportunity briefing available on the ADR website. We'll link to all that, or you can use the QR codes on the right there to go to the pages. So in this webinar, we're going to be hearing from Dr. Van Van, who is part of the Wage and Employment Dynamics team. And Van's work centres on the topics of gender differences in human capital and in the labour market. So Van, if you are ready, I would like to pass the baton on to you so that we can hear all about this particular data set.
Yeah. So thank you so much for introducing me. And in this call today, we also got happy to have Felix Ritchies, Professor Ritchies, on the call to help us to understand more about the data and then help us with the QA as well. So to start with, so we introduced about the ASHE, HMRC, PAYE and Self-Assessment. So ASHE is the annual surveys of hours and earning, and it represents 1% sample of the PAYE jobs in Great Britain, and the sample drawn randomly from the PAYE registrations in January of each year. And then the survey reference date is around mid-April of each year and conducted by ONS. And the HMRC we got in the data is represent 1% of this employee in the UK and represented in the ASHE sample. And we got the PAYE and Self-Assessment in Pacific. So PAYE is a pay as you earn real-time information. So the data is more for all people who have the employee jobs or occupation pensions. And we've got a very detailed employment scale by scheme, and then all the payment record payslip submitted by the employer to the HMRC. So the time coverage is from tax year 2015 to 2019. For self-assessment is the self-assessment data for those who make a self-assessment returns, and the detail of the self-assessment income, self-employment income, employment income, and other type of income. And the time coverage is around tax year 2011 to 2018. So next slide, please. So as you know, ASHE, so we got a very rich information about the personal information, age, gender, home postcode, and very specific in terms of employment and employee information, wage, specific and working hour, and then employee information in work location, legal status, and size. For the PAYE and self-assessment is adding more information of the people who observe in ASHE, because ASHE only observe in one specific point in the year, especially in the first quarter of the year. For PAYE, and we can observe it for all the years. So that's with PAYE, you can see a point in time employment and point in time payment. For self-assessment, we get income from sales employment, income from employment as well, and also income from other sources. So add up these two data sets, we create a more richer data set with all information, whether you can get the personal characteristic, and we can identify whether they're working at all in the current tax year or the previous tax year. And we can add more information on whether they're working on the ASHE survey reference day, they are in the PAYE or self-assessment system. And then similarly, we carry on job characteristic and employer characteristic as well. So next slide, please. So how we're combining ASHE and HMRC data. So we got the HMRC PAYE and self-assessment. So we can link these two data sets directly through the HMRC ID. That's the unique identification for one person. And then for the PAYE, we've got all the source files like payment submissions, employment, end of the year files. So from all of the informations, we transform it to the output files. Next, please. So we got the output files here. We turn all the payment system, payment submission into weekly clean and monthly clean. So that is for those who have the weekly payment and monthly payment. And then from those, we combine them and then we familiarize to turn it to the hourly and then turn back to the weekly panel and monthly panel. So now we've got the same scale. So that's we call pay weekly panel and PAYE monthly panel. So from all of that is mainly for the pay submission, and then we combine with the employment, the end of the year files, we create the ASHE supplement so that we add on we collapse it by per person per year, so that we got the information to ready to add on the ASHE data. So next, please. For self-assessment, we got similar as well. So all the source file, we got different type of returns. So like main tax return, short tax return schedule, additional information schedule, self-employment, partnership, solo trader, and all summaries, informations as well. So from all of that, so we are transformed it into the data output file. Next, please. So we combine it into the SA's master. So that is all of the information of the SA will combine to SA master. From SA master, we collapse it by per person per year. So we capture whether they in what type of return they are put in, and then we turn it to SA submaster. And then how we're going to link those to ASHE. So can next please. So we link to ASHE throughout the lookup files is provided by ONS. So PAYE and Self-Assessment are limited because in terms of the personal characteristic. So we have to carry all information like age and gender from ASHE through across the PAYE so we can get more information about personal characteristic. So that's why you can see how it works. So next slide, please. So here is some of the table to show the number of observation, the number of individual in the HMRC data, so that you can get the idea how big the data or how broad it can be. So in the weekly pay data, so we have around 100,000 people in the data set per year, and for the monthly, so we got around 3 times bigger than as the weekly panel, and then when we combine into a panel, we've got around 350,000 people. For self-assessment, we've got roughly around 100,000 person for each year. So next slide, please. So here's the linkage. So the linkage rate between the HMRC and PAYE. So with the ASHE whole panel, ASHE from 1997 to 2022, and then we merged with the ASHE supplement because ASHE supplement is per person per year. So we got around 725,000 observation being matched, and the match rate is vary across the year. It's moved from around 77% in 2014 to probably around 81% in 2018. So next, please. And for self-assessment, so we didn't expect the high linkage rate in with the self-assessment because they PAYE is shown for the employment job, and then self-assessment more kind of like the people who do the self-assessment return forms. So the linkage rate is lower, so lower from around 7.5% to probably up to 9% high in 2014. Yeah, next, please. So with all the documentations, like how we familiarize the pay from the weekly and monthly, there is also put in the user guides and the data explain, and then all the dictionary, what the variable in the list of each data will be, you can find it on the ADR data catalog or the ONS data catalog. So the limitations of the data, so bear in mind that the PAYE and Self-Assessment, they got a 2 different time coverage. And then so in PAYE, even though they are very rich, but some are empty variables. Like we got quite a lot of the pay, but some of them tend to be missing, and a lot of key link missing, like enterprise reference. So we can't link job by job between ASHE and the PAYE. Yeah, so that's why we have to collapse it by per person per year, so that we match it on by person. And then we've got some surprising, like we've got a lot about the marker for student, marker of maternity, parent leave as well, but their values a bit like arbitrary, sometimes missing, sometimes value. They got some value, so better to check before you put the application in. So the next slide, please. So how to access the data? So the data is already available throughout the ONS Secure Research Service. The code for reference is available on our website. And how to access data? So you become a accredited researcher, apply for the research project, and then access from the SRS. So here's the link, so that in the ADR UK it's already give you a really step-by-step guidance how to apply for it. So next one, please. So just briefly to let you know, when you apply for that for the data, what you expect the data will be look like. So you will given by different files. So the first one is the HMRC file. So you will given PAYE files and self-assessment file. So PAYE you will get 5 files in there. So 2 for weekly and monthly clean, and another 2 for weekly and monthly panel. And the one is ASHE supplement is for the PAYE. For self-assessment, we got SA master and SA submaster. And for the ASHE file, we get all the ASHE file, panel ASHE file and in annual files as well. So that we create the code so that we just for reference. So the PAYE and the ASHE now is linkable. So you can see the HMRC ID and the PIN in the HMRC is whether you can link it straight to the ASHE file. Okay. So next please. So the HMRC PAYE data is recently quite new. So we haven't really done a lot of research with that data set. We just do kind of data insight, number 1 for the ADR, so how many jobs, how much do you earn, and the data insight 2, the new evidence on the gender pay gap in the Great Britain, and then maybe one best specific academic journal you can read is about the income and earning volatilities from my brewer and other member teams. So here is key research priority that you can address using that data. So you can look at how much do your self-employment, employment income substitute for each other. So how large the gender wage gap in all earned income rather than only in employment income. So, and then is greater variation in wage throughout the time associated with low pay? Is it the validity of the change in employment and income related to local or region? And then what is the differences in income, employment volatilities different between the weekly and the monthly pay? And probably the student loan, whether you are a student, will increase the likelihood to work in the gig economy, which is a kind of a low pay work as well. So next, please. So to help you to identify your research objectives, so basically you have to define your clear research question. So you try to make advantage of the ASHE because ASHE is the employer-employee data set, and the advantage of the PAYE Self-Assessment. So PAYE is capture all the years rather than one specific point as in ASHE. And then you have to assess the data suitability if you go down to one specific occupations or one specific group. So yeah, just try to assess the data suitability. So the next slide, please. So how we can support you if you apply for the research fellowship. So we got a website here. You can look at what we did with the data, and then with not only that data and other data sets as well. Documentation, code, research, really there as well. And we also input some SRS code repositories for our work. And then we got if you got any kind of like information to ask specifically, so just drop on us an email and then submit your query, and you get back the feedback back in probably in a week times. So as soon as we can do it. We got a knowledge hub as well, so that's a peer-to-peer support. So you can look at on the link, follow there, and then you can access to the stakeholder groups, so academic, government, and public sector to shape your research and also engage to help to engage your research with to increase your impact as well. So we got a lot of community interest as well. So PhD and fellowship research event, conference event, and then research symposium and blogs. And then if you got any specific question, you can't really see it in the website or the knowledge hub, you can email us and then we can offer one-to-one support if it's necessary. So, and And now it's time to take the Q&A, I think. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Van. That was most informative. I found that I'm a lot smarter than I was 15 minutes ago. So appreciate you taking the time to do that. I see we have a few questions in, so I'm just going to bring on Karen, who's been having a look at those, and Felix as well, so that you can see us a bit better. Before I do go on to the questions posted in the Q&A section, you mentioned that you've got some key research priorities that you think the data set could be used to address. And I was just wondering how perhaps the government's priority missions play into these research priorities. Have you done any thinking around how the data set could be used to address those in any way?
So we use it with the low pay. So the low pay commissions also use our data sets as kind of the first instance to assess, because it's helped them to assess more kind of like the characteristic of the low pay, and then also observe for the people who are not in ASHE. So we can see it more in the HMRC data, which is not in April time. So we can see it across all the year as well. But we haven't really done specific, we haven't got specific output for that. But the low pay commission did got someone who worked with us. So so that's why we also suggest that you can, for example, like student marker, even though we don't have a student loan specifically in terms of number, but it will indicate that you were a student, and then how it's happened and how it increased the likelihood to be working in kind of a low pay sector or low pay employment or in the gig economy, for example.
Excellent, excellent. Felix, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I'll wait and see what comes up.
Okay.
Or else I'll answer the Q&A question, because I was looking in the chat rather than the Q&A box.
Okay, no worries.
Oh, okay.
Karen, yes, I think you probably got these covered.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for sharing your questions, and keep coming though. Keep sending those in, because we've got plenty of time. So this is a great opportunity if you do have questions to get direct support now from Van and Felix. So thank you both for being here. So the first couple of questions, Felix, I don't know if you can see these, but have been about the possibilities of linking different data sets within ADR UK. So at first, sort of a more general question about whether we can link, say, health data with other data like this particular data set, or perhaps rapid. But then the questioner sort of goes in and asks more specifically, is it possible to link ASHE PAYE with the Public Health Research Database for England and Wales? So Felix, perhaps you want to answer that specific question, but I could also offer some general thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, what we did is we can't link directly because we don't have names and addresses, so ONS. So in practicality, if it was agreed that this should be done, what would happen is we need to get ONS to do the linking, because they have the names and addresses on ASHE. We don't have access to them. Link it to the Public Health Research Database, which I'm not familiar with, but I presume that you would be able to get some personal identifying information from there. If you haven't got personal identifying information on Public Health Research Database, then this is a non-starter, because ASHE is only 1% of the population. So trying to do a probabilistic match on just broad characteristics isn't going to work very well. But if you've got names on both of those, it's doable. That's the technical side of these things. As to whether it would be put forward, this will be something I'll put back to Karen. But I mean, the thing is, you need to make a case for it to be a new data resource. I don't think this is within the scope of the fellowships here, because this would be quite a significant project, and it's something that I think you need to ask ADR UK. So basically, the linkages that aren't existing aren't within scope of this fellowship. That doesn't mean they're not possible, but this I think would be interesting and quite useful, but that's a separate issue. I think, Karen, do you want to?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, definitely. So I think linking RAPID or ASHE PAYE to the Public Health Research Database would be another major data linkage. So ADR UK is very interested in ways in which we can continue to enhance our existing flagship data sets. That's something, as you may know, we've just been refunded for the next 5 years. So yeah, there is some interest in kind of trying to understand the ways in which we want to enhance our existing flagship data sets, but that would be a major piece of work, one that we'd have to work carefully with data owners on to get agreement, and also make sure that there was the necessary resource to actually do the linking. So that one, as far as I'm aware, isn't currently on the plan. So but that is the kind of work that ADR UK does, and it involves a lot of partners, a lot of work, a lot of coordination and resourcing over the long term. And that's the sort of the work we do want to do, so that we can make that data set available for all accredited researchers. So that is most definitely not a piece of work that would be achievable within a research fellowship. The idea with the research fellowship is that we're utilising the data that are already made available to all accredited researchers. So I hope that distinction makes sense. It's not about the creation of new data sets. However, Felix, I don't know if you, whether it is possible to link in whether ASHE census is linkable at all. So one of the things we have allowed in the fellowship is that you, as long as you're focusing primarily on a flagship data set, it's possible to link in additional supplementary data where ONS could easily bring it in, or it was already available in the ONS SRS. And now, I mean, what we might be talking about there is perhaps linking on geography, for example, that kind of thing, but not kind of major scale.
Yeah, I think trying to link on a one-to-one basis would be tricky. You could try to do something with more smaller areas, something like sort of data fusion type approach. But even that, you want to think about how you're going to do this analysis, because there is also the practicality of getting stuff through the assessment panel, which takes long enough, even if it's a standard project. I think this would be quite complicated, and you might be better off actually doing something as a separate analysing two data sets separately. So your application would be about the ASHE census stuff, and treat the PHRS as PHRD as a separate issue. Yeah,
and that would be possible. There is scope to look at more than one flagship data set, though of course we really encourage you to think about sort of feasibility and what's actually deliverable within the scope of a fellowship, because we know these data sets are complex and they can take a significant portion of your fellowship time to actually really discover the data, understand the data. We've had some feedback from researchers that could take up to say 70 or 80% of time. So including another major data set definitely needs very careful consideration. Okay, well, I hope that answers your. Sorry, Van. Yes, would you like to add something?
I just add something. So I know that from the RAPID dataset, for example, so they're not allowed to link as at the individual level. So basically, it's done now AET. So you're not able to link in individual ones with it. So it's not feasible. So.
Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, so the next question then, Felix, is about industries and occupations varying across sort of workforce type. So whether that's PAYE versus self-employment, and just wanting a bit more information on what kind of the level of granularity that's available for SIC and SOC. And maybe you could explain what those are for people that aren't familiar with those acronyms.
So industry, so the type of industry the business work for is classified by SIC, Standard Industrial Classification. So that has effectively 5 levels of detail. So it's the full 5-digit classification. For those of you familiar with this, in other words, you've got the broad area of, you know, sort of manufacturing services, telecoms. Then you've got below that, you've got sort of car manufacturing. Then below that, you've got the level of, I don't know, truck manufacturing as opposed to car manufacturing. And then you've got making wheels or whatever it is. I don't know what is the different levels are. So you have the full detail of that on the data sets. And similarly for occupation, again, occupation comes at, I can't remember, 4 or 5-digit fans. I think
The SOC is 4-digit, I think.
it's 4-digit. Okay, so you've got the same sort of idea. But broadly, this is someone who works in a professional area, subset of working in education, subset of working in higher education type thing. So you've got the full detail of that in the ASHE data. One slight problem at the moment is we are still waiting to get an enterprise reference number. So for the HMRC data, because what we've got is for the HMRC link to ASHE, ASHE has all of this information, but what we'd also like to be able to do for that HMRC data would be able to get information about firms which aren't linked to ASHE. In other words, you don't have to go through ASHE to get the firm information. You go directly from the HMRC data to the enterprise reference, which wouldn't have occupation, obviously, because that would be about the business, but it would have that business coding. ONS has promised us for this about 2 years ago. We're still waiting for it. So it might appear at some point. But anything that's linked to ASHE, we do have the full level of granularity. Anything else, Van?
No, so I think the PAYE and Self-Assessment, we don't have the SIG code or the subcode there. So
No.
the SIG and the subcode there is coming
Yeah.
from ASHE. So
yeah, or from this enterprise reference number if we ever get
yeah.
it. Mm-hmm. If you do want it, make sure you put it on your application form, because that might sort of prompt ONS to do things. So.
Okay, that's good advice. Thank you. So the next question is about whether ASHE includes employer-specific variables. So things like productivity, output, employment costs.
The answer is it doesn't, but because you have the enterprise reference on there, you can link it to other organizations. So, for example, the work that Van has been doing in terms of looking at sort of gender wage variation within firms, that's because we can link that to firms, and then we can start to look at other characteristics of firms. So sorry, that is still within ASHE, but the point is, although ASHE is only a 1% sample, so in theory that limits you to doing things with large firms. From the stuff that Van's been doing, we do get a reasonable number of smaller firms in the data set appearing as well. So again, the thing is, you can link it to other information. It's not good to say, let's look at the productivity data in the annual respondents database and link on ASHE to it, because then you're going to get a small number of MASH. What is a sensible thing to do is say, these are the people in those organizations, let's link the productivity information to that. So that's the sensible way to do it, is to add business variables to the ASHE data set rather than adding ASHE variables to the other data sets, try and analyze them.
Okay, thank you. And please do add any follow-up questions if you want to dive into those anymore. Van, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think it's right. So we got the enterprise reference in the ASHE data. So we can link with the business surveys or any information from the productivity of the firms into ASHE based on the enterprise reference there. So
okay, so the linking to the business survey data, that's an additional piece of work that would be required. That's not necessarily part of the ASHE
yes,
HMRC linkage.
Well, we've got the link reference on there. So yeah, although, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you put the application in, so you have to identify 2 data. It's not in one as ASHE only anymore. So now you have to ASHE and then the business data, whatever business enterprise or productivity data you need to. So
okay, so the business survey data is additional ONS survey
yes.
data.
Yeah.
Yes,
that you could
it's
request alongside the ASHE
yes. 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 So it's just part of the standard data set, so you can regress the normal. The one slight complication is now that HMRC has decided, for reasons of its own, that the business data should only be accessible through university locations. So if you want to use the BSD with other data sets, they're currently saying you can't use it for home access. So again, that's something to want to think about if you need to travel to university or travel to an ONS site a long distance. This will be something that might you need to be aware of.
Okay, that's a really, really important point. Definitely
Yeah.
understanding where you're going to access this data, what your access arrangements are. So thank you. Okay, so the next question is, there's been some media noise about data quality concerns about ASHE. So the question is whether you've noticed any quality issues or limitations in your exploration of the data.
I think the media noise has been more about LFS rather than ASHE Labour Force Survey. I think, although Van, correct me because you've been taking more notice of these, but I think it's more about that. I mean, ONS has just made some comments about this, yes, partly because
Might be taken at the moment. So please leave your message after the tone.
Sorry, it's my
yeah, I mean, they did send out a notice about this and about looking at weighting, and partly that's directly coming out of our work from this about suggestions that the weighting could be improved by taking account of non-response amongst businesses. So I think, yeah, I mean, post-pandemic, like many of the data sets, then there was a fall off in responses to that. Van, do you want to comment on that?
I think after pandemic, so we got the number of observations is dropped down, but I think ONS try to tackle that issues by they try to increase the sample of ASHE more, and then I think it's not implied. I think the newest one is 2024. I think so. So I think that's what I know.
Okay. Okay. That's great, thank you. Let's move on to the next question then. Is it possible to analyse or track the wages of, say, skilled workers versus unskilled workers over time, or by, say, university graduates versus non-university graduates?
So I'll take the Van. Certainly you can track the wages of workers over time. That's sort of part of the point of being longitudinal, and track them if you're lucky over a very long time, because you might have sort of 2004 to 2024 reliably, or possibly a bit longer than that. The skilled versus unskilled will come from the occupation coding, as we mentioned. That's all in detail. University versus non-university non-graduates is trickier. We did try to see whether it was possible to create a marker for students based upon a sort of very predictable pattern that, for example, they either don't have any work and then they suddenly start appearing in the labour force in graduate jobs at, say, 21, 22, or alternatively they're doing sort of part-time bar work and things that again suddenly appear. But we decided that wasn't useful in the end, that it wasn't really possible to reliably predict who was a student. What you can do is use the census data. So linked ASHE census data, which does have a student marker in there. Downside of that is that that's 2011 and following people through. But on the other hand, if the ones who are in the census, then they've got their degree or not got their degree. Not very many people will be picking up a degree in later life. So you could reasonably say that if they've got a degree in 2021 census, that's an indication of they've got them throughout their subsequent working life on here.
Okay.
So you can use it using a census subset for the university graduate. So tracking wages of skilled non-skilled workers, that's easy. That's what the data set is really strong on. Doing things like education is trickier, but you have to link it to the census.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Felix.
Oh, I would say there is also a student loan marker, which we haven't explored very much in the tax data, because obviously the student loan has an implication for taxes. we haven't explored this very much. There is a possibility to use that, I guess. Obviously, not all students have loans, and they're probably going to be in quite different categories, the ones who don't have loans. But that might be an indication, not that then, if they don't have a student loan, they're not a student, but if they do have a student loan, you can make a reasonable inference. But that could be something to explore. We've not really explored that yet.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Felix. So where are we? So we've got a question here. I have a project accredited already for accessing ASHE with census via the SRS. Would that be eligible for fellowship funding, for example, to extend to use ASHE PAYE or address additional or complementary research questions, or does it have to be a completely new project? So I'm wondering whether you're sort of asking perhaps two questions here, whether one is about extending an existing project application that's been approved through the SRS to include additional questions, which Felix, you probably know the answer better than me, but I'm thinking that would be possible.
Okay.
Or although what the benefits are of doing that versus kind of just having a separate project approved. But in terms of whether you can extend an existing project as part of a fellowship, I mean, I think primarily it's just about making sure you're absolutely meeting the objectives of the fellowship. I think if it's building on previous work, I don't see that necessarily being problematic, but are you meeting all of the objectives? Let that be the focus, you know. So yeah, I think the project needs to align with what we're asking for. So do that check. If you've got any sort of further questions, then definitely follow up with the team and we can see if we can kind of help get to the bottom of that. Oh, project accreditation took 6 months, so don't want to go through that again. Felix, do you want to answer that question about extending an existing project?
That was my point. It takes a very long time to go through these project applications. And those who've done them, it's a really tedious process and doesn't really generate much information. So the answer for this is you need to talk to the SRS people about this. If you can get it approved as part of your application, if it's currently within scope of your existing project but requires the additional data sets, that's usually more straightforward to do. If you do want to change the scope of your data set, I think probably as long as it's broadly within the area you're looking at, then they'll probably be quite tolerant of this. If it's something very different, then they might ask you to put in your application. But I would talk to the SRS team first off and get them to look at this. And as far as possible, if it's within the scope of your application, then that should be an easier route to go down.
Yeah, okay, good advice. And really, I mean, in our next 5-year investment phase, one of our major priorities is really to streamline the researcher journey, and that is going to include, you know, all aspects, including that first stage when you're getting your project approved. So the idea is that we should start to see these times coming down. That is very much our aspiration. Oh, not all conversations are loading right now. Let me just refresh. Yes, slides are going to be shared. I think you've answered that one, Steve. All the presentation will be and slides and the recording will all be made available with the FAQs on our website. Okay, in terms of occupation. Oh, sorry, Felix.
No, sorry, I was going to respond to Akbar's, exactly the one you're reading out.
Oh, yeah. So the question is, in terms of occupations, is it possible to distinguish between the NHS and social care workforce, or is it reported only as a combined health and social care category?
Okay, so what you can do is you can distinguish between whether it's a public or a private sector employer. Organisations aren't named in there, so you can't directly work out this is a particular trust, but you could look at the combination of, you know, size of organisation and the whether it's public sector or private sector, to try and work out, what sort of industry this is. The markers for ownership include public sector, private partnership, which I think covers GPs, and then sort of all the standard public limited company type things. So that might be worthwhile. That might be possible in there. So you're doing it by inference rather than by directly looking at this. Yeah. Of course,
Yeah.
one thing is you won't be able to work out if, for example, someone's being employed by an agency on that. So they're employed by an agency to work for the NHS, for example, then they would appear as a private sector worker, wouldn't they, Van? I think. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So still, lots of exploration and creativity almost required in making sense of how you can identify, what's possible with the data. How can you identify different types of workers? What about apprentices? Are they flagged in the data?
Yes, they are. So, yeah. So straightforward. There's a marker, and it's been there since about 2015, I think. So it's not full time. It's not a continual data set, but it has been there for quite a long time now. And one of the things that we do is we also put the apprentice wage, minimum wage on there, because it says if they're an apprenticeship, and also I can't remember how we do it now, Van. Is it we work out when they start their training, so you can work out whether they're in their first year or not, because for older apprentices that affects the wages that they get. So you got. Do we have the type of apprenticeship in there? Don't think we do. Do we? You just have whether they are an apprentice or not, don't we?
Yeah, we don't have a type of apprenticeship, just a
No.
marker, yes or no with that.
Yeah, yes or no when they started their training, so they're been doing it for more than a year or so. Yeah.
Okay, well, good. That was a nice, straightforward one. Okay, I can't see any more questions that we haven't answered. So if I've missed it, please just pop it back in the top of the Q&A. But in the meantime, I might just ask Felix and Van whether there are any sort of particular sort of coding or programming requirements or skills that are preferred if you're going to be using this data set, and what you might expect, being new to this data as you begin to kind of prepare and ready the data for use. If you could just describe a little bit what skills and kind of time frames you might want to bear in mind.
So let me start first, and then Felix can add on. So with the data, so we got a code outside on our website. It's just for reference. So it's different with the ASHE and census, because ASHE and census require the researcher have to run the code inside the SRS to combine to get the final data. But here, so the data we provided is at the end stage already, so it's linkable. So basically, you just need to link the two data sets, the HMRC files and with the ASHE file together. So, and then all the coding we use inside the SRS or in the whole project is the data. So you can use R or Python inside the SRS, it's up to you, but we mainly use data. So that if you want to read our code, so you have to understand slightly this data, what does it mean? But for the HMRC data, so the code is just for reference, because we already pre-processing and run the code, everything already, and provide the final output for you. So it's slightly different with ASHE and census 2011. So just let you aware of that. So yeah, Felix, you want to add anything on top of it? Yeah.
So since that, feel free to translate them. So they'll see have R and Python and SPSS in the SRS. It does take a while because the data sets are very large from there, unless you're just working with the ASHE the ASHE HMRC linked data set. That's relatively small. One thing to point out, as Van said, this is relatively unexplored, the HMRC data. There's an awful lot of stuff that could be done with it. So we will certainly be trying to do more work with it, and particularly looking at the HMRC data to fill in the gaps in ASHE. That'll be really important. So there is a lot of unknown stuff that could be done with this data set. The HMRC is relatively unexplored at the moment, so it's quite a wide field to make your mark on here.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. New territory.
Yeah.
Okay, we have had another question about, can anyone working at an eligible institution apply? Yes, that is UK HEIs. There, we can perhaps post the UKRI policy on this. There are some other research organisations that are eligible, but I think, and does such institution need to be involved in the project? So your institution would submit the application on your behalf. They're likely also going to be involved in supporting your access arrangements. If you're accessing the data through your institution, there are separate applicant webinars we've got available about how to gain secure research access. But one of the routes is through assured organisational connectivity, or AOC, which often your academic institution can hold. So you're likely to want to work closely with them in terms of your access arrangements. But then you go on to say that you're also a statistician in the Scottish government. So I'm just wondering whether you've got eligibility, whether you're affiliated at an academic institution. I think that's, and then Steve, I don't know whether you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I have just posted up the link to the organisational eligibility there, so do go have a read of that, and then drop us an email with your specific circumstances. From memory, it sounds like, based on the information you've given us, you might not be eligible as working for the Scottish Government, but if you have an academic affiliation, for example, we could go down that route. But it's also worth bearing in mind that we will only fund 80% of the cost of your fellowship, so your organisation will need to support the other 20%. But as I say, probably the best thing in this case is to drop us an email with your information, so we can understand your specific circumstances, and we can then give you a bit of a more nuanced answer if we can. Okay,
fantastic. Well, no more questions have come in other than that one. So yeah, I don't know whether Van or Felix, you've got any sort of parting tips.
Not really. No, as I said, this is quite the Wild West out there in terms of this data set. So feel free to listen. So come chat to us if you want ideas or things.
Yeah, great stuff. And so maybe we can just put the email address in the chat. It was wagedynamics@ue.ac.uk. So I'll just pop that in the chat if you need to follow up with the team. But like Steve said in the chat, this recording will be shared as well, along with the slides. Okay, Steve, did you want to say anything else before we go to the final slide?
Yeah, if we could just have the final slide. And yeah, thank you once again, Van and Felix. It's always a pleasure. But before we go, I just wanted to flag up that there are a few more webinars in the pipeline that may be of interest to you. The opportunity briefing webinar actually took place last week, but that is now available on our website, and that's designed for applicants to get an understanding of the funding opportunity. And there are a couple of other ones coming up as well. So we've got a webinar presented by one of the community catalyst teams about how to write and shape a good funding application, which some of you may find of help. And the people delivering that are obviously very well experienced people, having applied for a lot of funding, received a lot of funding, and assessed a lot of funding applications in their careers. So they'll be good people to listen to. And the other one is both of the community catalyst teams are going to do a combined presentation on the opportunity launch day, in fact, so 13th of November, where they're going to sort of break down to the research agendas that they've developed as part of their Catalyst Awards. That might help shape some of the thinking that you do around any potential application and project that you decide to put in to the competition. So yeah, as I say, everything's going to be available on our website, and you can always get in contact with the ADR team for general questions, and obviously the dataset teams are always available and ready to engage and support you as you develop your research agendas. So I think that's probably us done. So again, thank you all for coming along, and look forward to seeing an application from you in a few weeks' time.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.